Welcome back now to our first conversation. The 2021 Finance Bill, which was transmitted to the National Assembly by President Muhammadu Buhari. We see one interesting part is the bill seeks to tax the profits of a company, any trade or business without a base in Nigeria. Well, we'll get more insight now from Ajibola Olumola, partner, Tax Regulatory and People Services, KPMG Nigeria. Great to have you on the program. Good morning.
Good morning, Ladi. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. Well, 2022 is looking like it's going to be a very interesting year, regarding the federal government's plan to raise revenue via taxation. Tell us more about this bill.
Well, it's an interesting bill. Firstly, one must commend the current government, the President, His Excellency, President Buhari, the Minister for Finance, Budget and National Planning, and the tax authorities led by the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service for being consistent in terms of an articulation of the fiscal policies that will underpin revenue generation and fiscal revenues accruing to the federal government of Nigeria, starting from 2019 when we had the first finance bill promulgated after a hiatus, if you like, of nearly 20-something years. The last bill, the last finance act we had was in the days of the military in 1999. And now this was reintroduced in 2019. And there has been a consistency every year in bringing through the budget proposals for the bill, versions of finance bills that signal the direction in which the economic planners want to move the country. And 2022's finance bill, which has just been presented to the National Assembly, will be the subject of public hearing at the House of Representatives this morning. And it follows consistently on the principles of the previous versions. And so you're looking at closing tax gaps. You're looking at harmonizing Nigeria's tax laws with international best practices and international trends. Interestingly, as you opened the program this morning, you referenced Nigeria bringing in regulations for taxing foreign companies that participate in this economy and derive value from this economy. That's one of the signposts of this year's finance bill that has now been submitted to the National Assembly. It's quite an encompassing legislation, identifies other areas of gaps in the fiscal net and makes reasonable proposals to trying to address some of those gaps.
All right, so, looking at, taxing some of these digital companies that do not have a presence here in Nigeria, I'm wondering, how is this going to work? Taxing, for instance, a company like Facebook and AliExpress, how's that going to work, really?
Well, the thing about tax is that it's situated on a tripod. So you first have the tax authorities, the fiscal authorities, you have the taxpayer, and then you have an intervening arena where they all, correspond. To answer your question specifically, it is in the interest of the global digital giants to work with fiscal authorities all over the world to have a harmonized way of tracking revenues in every fiscal area where they work. And it is not surprising, if you take Facebook one as an illustration, that Facebook has announced that advertisements that are placed from Nigeria will now attract a VAT of 7.5%. That tells you that Facebook itself is taking steps to bring itself into compliance with the rules in every geography where it operates. Now, you might ask, how would Facebook know that a customer that's viewing or opening its pages is located in Nigeria? And the answer is technology. So each time you log in to the internet, your computer's IP address is logged. So absolutely everybody you are dealing with, if they wanted to, can identify where you are located, down to within a few centimeters of your current location. They know where you are. And so they know who is transacting with them. It's also for anti-fraud purposes and to also enable the global transactions in commerce to go on in a harmonious way. So everybody knows who they are dealing with. Facebook knows when it's dealing with Nigerian counterparts. Alibaba knows when you've ordered goods for delivery to Nigeria. So what they now have to do is work in a cooperative manner with the tax authorities in Nigeria. Where they need to register for tax, they can register for tax. The proposals in this year's finance bill even provide a situation where they may opt to appoint tax agents in Nigeria that can assist them in complying with their statutory obligations here. Obviously, these are new proposals. There will still be a bit of devil in the details and a few things to be, hammered out between taxpayers and the tax authority. Okay. But we hope that this can be the beginning of a dialogue.
Right,
but would compliance.
But would it require these companies actually having offices here in Nigeria?
Ordinarily, it shouldn't. However, bear in mind that the world is now a global village, and it is also in the commercial interest of some of these giants to sometimes have offices in some of the geographies where they operate. So the tax provisions will not necessarily require these global giants to have offices in Nigeria, but there may be other business reasons why they choose to do so. For example, we heard a few months ago that Twitter was considering opening an office in Nigeria. They had opened one in Ghana. So there are very many business reasons why global giants will decide where to put a firm footprint or whether to only operate through a digital footprint. But tax is just one of the consequences of operating in the fiscal environment. And Nigeria would allow some of these global giants to appoint agents to assist them in country if they don't want to come in here fiscally.
Okay, but there are also concerns, that the burden of these taxes will be passed on to, merchants and users of these platforms. What's your take on that?
That's a very good question, and it's a very pertinent observation. You're absolutely correct. The cost of this taxation would ultimately, in some form or another, be passed on to the final consumer. But bear in mind that that is expected to be the case anyway. VAT, value-added tax, for example, is expected ultimately to be borne by the consumer, by the final consumer of the product or the service that is the subject of the charge. And if you think about supply of goods, again, if you were bringing goods into Nigeria today, whether you were you purchased the goods in Nigeria, from wherever, you would pay duty at the port of arrival, which would also include a VAT on the cost of the goods you're bringing into the country. So yes, there will be an effect on consumer prices, and we can expect that the fiscal planners would also need to think of other ways of managing whatever negative consequence that may bring from an inflation perspective or other consequences of having an increase in consumer price indexes.
Right, and I see that the bill also seeks to compel every account holder in Nigeria to have a tax identification number, that's a TIN number. Is this still the case, and what are the implications of this?
Well, not in this year's version of the finance bill. I didn't see any such proposal in the version of the bill that's been sent to the National Assembly. It may very well be that this comment is hankering back to previous finance bills, finance acts that have already made provisions for taxpayer identification and harmonization of databases between the tax authority and the banks. And for those who are familiar with the protocols for bank account opening, today, having to submit a tax identification number is one of the information requirements that banks will ask of you today. So that is not a matter that is stipulated in this year's finance bill, but I'm aware that it is a matter that is already in the Know Your Customer protocols that banks have to undertake, and previous finance acts have already addressed this.
All right. Looking at some global tax matters now, Nigeria in October rejected a tax pact signed by about 136 countries, which aim to enforce corporate tax rate of at least 15%. What would you say is the concern here? Why the rejection?
Well, again, that's a very astute observation, and it's one that has taken the Nigerian public by surprise. And a lot of questions have been asked as to the what sense it makes for Nigeria to stand apart from the global consensus on these very important areas. And the Federal Inland Revenue Service has been very proactive as well in trying to engage with the tax-paying public to explain, in a sense, why they have taken the decision at this time not to sign onto some of those frameworks. Of course, Nigeria is an active participant at the United Nations level and also the OECD level, where Nigerian representatives have been actively involved in the negotiation of many of these trade deals and tax deals. My understanding is that if you look at the way the current framework is stipulated or grounded, it is intended to look at and capture global giants of a minimum size. Now, from the perspective of the developed world, that minimal size makes sense. If you're looking at $500 million of revenue, $300 million of revenue, those are really good numbers from a developed country perspective. From a developing country perspective, $500 million may mean that Nigeria is not able to tax any foreign digital player other than the really, really big ones. So how many foreign players will derive $500 million worth of revenue from Nigeria in a year? You'll probably find that maybe only one or two. So from a Nigerian tax authority perspective, signing on to the deal in its current form will lead to hundreds of companies falling outside of the tax net. Companies that are today in the tax net that will from tomorrow stop paying tax in Nigeria. Now, that appears to be the consequence that informs Nigeria saying, hang on a sec, let's also think of developing countries and let's come up with a framework that also addresses the peculiar perspectives of developing countries. Now, I understand where they're coming from, the FRS, and I think the rest of the world must listen to Africa and the other developing world and think of frameworks that make sense from a developing world perspective. But from a taxpayer and tax advisor perspective, obviously, we like to see consistency. We like to see harmony with global trends. And so our appeal would be to the United Nations and the OECD to engage with Africa, Nigeria, and other developing countries in the world in a manner that allows us to bring all these views to the table and come up with a framework that makes sense for everybody so that we can all go forward together on the same principles and the same foundation. That is what will make it easier for global giants to continue to grow and to continue to contribute to the development and growth of the world's economy. So those are very pertinent questions, Ladi. And I think the answer would be in getting parties to just come to the round table and discuss these things in a very honest and transparent manner. And I must salute the Nigerian fiscal authorities. It's weird to have to commend them so often, but truly they deserve commendation because in this one, they've been on road shows, explaining themselves, letting us know what's going on, and telling us how they intend to continue to work with the UN and the OECD and other trade partners in resolving the dispute. So I hope it's resolved as soon as possible.
Hopefully. Well, we'll keep tracking that. Well, the World Bank has called on the federal government to impose special taxes on alcohol, cigarettes, and sugar-sweetened beverages to, improve primary health care. Is this the way the government should be towing at this point?
Well, we all read in the papers over the weekend about the World Bank encouraging Nigeria to introduce what we call sin taxes, because, it's probably politically incorrect to use that phrase in Nigeria, but that is the phrase that's been used in many other countries of the world that have introduced such legislation. And it's not uncommon. It's actually very prevalent across the world now to see an increase in fiscal rates, whether it's in excise duties, in special taxation, directed towards some of these exotic products, whether it's sugar, carbonated drinks, cigarettes, things that contribute in a larger than usual percentage to incidents of the state having to intervene by providing advanced health care to its citizens. So it's not surprising to see the World Bank making recommendations to Nigeria to consider the introduction of such taxes. Now, of course, you would expect that the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria and companies in the fast-moving consumer goods space would be a little bit challenged because they might say to you that, oh, Nigeria already pays so much taxes. So if you increase the tax rate, the hurdle rate, like you also asked earlier, Ladi, will this cost be passed on to the customer? So if you increase the tax rates on sugar, what that then means is that companies that produce soft drinks might be motivated to increase the consumption, the cost price of a bottle of soft drinks in order to compensate themselves for the increment in excise duties or increment in taxes as a result of introduction of same tax. So you've got to then say to yourself, what is the capacity of the Nigerian consumer? How much, how expansive, how elastic is our purchasing power? Because there's no point increasing the excise rates to a point where consumption drops, which means that the revenue of these companies drops. And when their revenue drops, it means that their contribution to tax will also drop.
Right.
On the other hand, you don't want the rate to be so low that we consume these things to a destructive level. And then even the little increase in tax revenue will then be used in financing advanced tertiary healthcare, which then places a higher revenue, higher expenditure burden on the government to provide for healthcare. So it's a balancing act that the regulators have to play.
Yeah, very serious balancing act there. Well, I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Jibola Olumola, Partner, Tax, Regulatory and People Services, KPMG Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on Business Morning.
Thank you so much, Ladi.